The storage room smelled of dust and ozone. Nurse Rita Sowers tightened the tourniquet. At 2:47 a.m., she had just pronounced Margaret Hale dead. Checked the pulse, checked the pupils, called the attending. Across the hall, a monitor connected to an empty bed should have displayed nothing but a flat green line. Instead, it spelled out a name, Margaret Hale, and began beeping. The timestamp on the screen read 2:47. Margaret Hale had been dead for 30 seconds. Her body lay on the other side of the hospital. St. Catherine's Medical Center sat on the outskirts of Worcester, Massachusetts, a red brick building from the 1950s that had grown in ugly wings over 4 decades. The ICU occupied the 3rd floor, a long corridor of glass-walled rooms facing a central nursing station. On the night of the 14th of October 1987, the unit held 6 patients. 3 nurses covered the shift. The hospital had a reputation for quiet competence, no awards, no scandals, just steady work. Margaret Hale, 61, had been admitted 6 days earlier with pneumonia that had developed into septic shock. Her condition had been declining for 36 hours. The night attending, Dr. Elaine Marsh, had last seen her at midnight. The charts were up to date. Nothing about this shift had suggested it would become a footnote in a dozen paranormal journals. The Code Blue protocol at St. Catherine's required 2 nurses to confirm death. Rita Sowers and Kevin Park performed the checks independently: carotid pulse, pupillary response, absence of breath sounds. Both recorded the time of death at 2:47 a.m. The attending physician signed the certificate by phone at 2:52. The body was to remain in place until the morgue team arrived, a standard procedure that could take up to 90 minutes. At 2:55, Kevin Park walked to the supply closet at the far end of the hall to retrieve clean linens. He passed bed 7 unoccupied since 11 p.m. and heard a monitor beeping. He looked through the glass. The bed was empty. He checked the monitor. The screen displayed Margarine Hale, heart rate 78, a steady green waveform. The bed was empty. He checked the room's number. Bed 7 was registered as vacant in the shift log. Kevin Park was not a man who panicked. He wrote down the time in his notebook, 2:56 a.m., and walked to the nursing station. When Rita Sowers reviewed the monitor log from bed 7, she found no cardiac data from the previous hours. The machine had recorded flatline since 11:04 p.m., the departure time of the previous patient, a man named Robert Fenn, who had been transferred to the cardiac ward. The log contained no entry for Margaret Hale. Yet the screen, when she returned to check it at 3 a.m., still displayed Hale's name. She pressed the silence button. The beeping stopped. She walked to the room where Hale's body lay and confirmed the patient tag on her wrist still read the same. The name on the monitor matched the name on the wrist. There was no physical connection between bed 7 and any patient in the ICU. The monitor was a Criticon Model 8000 standard issue, wired only to its own power supply and a central nursing station display. Rita Sowers did not report the anomaly that night. She noted it in her personal log, a small leather notebook she kept in her locker, and continued her rounds. When Rita Sowers reported the incident to hospital administration the following morning, the response was measured. A biomedical engineer, Thomas Vega, examined the Criticon monitor and found no fault in its hardware. The memory chip showed no data corruption. Vega's report, dated the 16th of October 1987, stated that the monitor had performed within manufacturer specifications and that the display discrepancy likely resulted from a labeling error in the central logging system. The case was closed. Margaret Hale's body was released to her family on October 15th. The hospital changed the monitor's position in the room and performed a standard software reset. No further anomalies were reported from bed 7. A single incident report was filed, marked resolved, and buried in the administrative archive. For the next 3 years, nothing happened until a hospital renovation in 1991 opened the ICU for a full equipment overhaul, and a new engineer rediscovered Vega's report while cataloging old hardware. The 1991 audit revealed that Criticon Model 8000 monitors had been associated with similar incidents at 3 other hospitals in New England between 1984 and 1989. None had been reported publicly. At Mercy Hospital in Springfield, a monitor displayed the name of a patient who had died 2 weeks earlier, the same anomaly, the same unexplained cardiac readout, the same flatline in the machine's own log. At a smaller facility in Keene, New Hampshire, a night nurse reported a monitor calling out a patient's name aloud through its speaker. The model had a verbal alert function that should have required specific programming to activate. The common thread in every case was the timing. Each occurrence happened between 2 and 3:30 a.m., in the first 48 hours after a patient had died in the same unit. Thomas Vega, who had written the original Street Catherine's report, was interviewed by a biomedical safety board in 1993. His account, recorded in the board minutes, contained one line that was later redacted from the public copy. The redacted section is what this episode is really about. The biomedical explanation is clean and satisfying. Critics point to electromagnetic interference from adjacent equipment, software ghosting in aging memory chips, and labeling errors during patient transfer. These are real phenomena. Anyone who has worked in a hospital IT environment knows that monitors occasionally display cache data when systems reset. A 1,989 study in the Journal of Clinical Engineering documented 14 cases of monitor ghosting in ICU settings across the United States. The study concluded that all cases were attributable to hardware aging and insufficient grounding protocols. The American Nurses Credentialing Center issued a revised monitoring protocol in 1991 recommending regular memory wipes on bedside equipment. This is the story the hospital told. It is plausible, documented, and as we will see, almost certainly incomplete. The redacted line from Thomas Vega's 1993 testimony, obtained through a Freedom of Information request by researcher Dana Cole in 2019, reads as follows. I observed the monitor display a name and waveform for a patient I had personally confirmed deceased 20 minutes prior on a machine that was not connected to any patient in the unit. The redaction was requested by Criticon's legal department. The testimony was not classified as evidence in any proceeding. What makes this line significant is not the supernatural claim, it is the confirmation that a trained biomedical engineer, working under oath, witnessed the same phenomenon that Rita Sowers described from the nursing station. Vega did not speculate about ghosts. He documented what he saw. The waveform on the screen, he noted in his personal journal recovered separately in 2021, matched the last recorded cardiac rhythm of the deceased patient, as stored in the hospital's central monitoring archive. The monitor displayed data it could not have generated from its own hardware. Consider a different question. Not what caused the monitor to display the name, but what data source did it access to generate a waveform it did not record. The Criticon Model 8000 operated on a closed local system. It did not connect to the central monitoring archive. It stored its own data on its own chip. The waveform displayed during the Street Catherine's incident did not appear in the monitor's own log. It appeared, according to Vega's notes, to be a match for the patient's last cardiac cycle, a cycle recorded not on the monitor itself, but on a separate system at the nursing station. In 1992, a systems analyst named Paul Grisham examined the hospital's networking architecture and discovered that the Criticon monitors had an undocumented data port, a maintenance interface, used during manufacturing recalibration. The port was passive. It should have been inert. Grisham's report, which he published privately and never submitted to the hospital, theorized that under specific electromagnetic conditions, a rare combination of power fluctuation and proximity to a body with residual biological activity, the port could theoretically receive data rather than transmit it. The biological conditions required a recently deceased body and a living nervous system that had not yet fully ceased electrical function. Grisham estimated the window at approximately 90 minutes post-mortem. Street Catherine's medical center closed in 2004. The building was demolished in 2009. The Criticon monitors were auctioned off to a medical surplus company in Albany. Rita Sowers retired in 1998 and declined all interview requests until 2018, when she agreed to speak on the condition that her current name would not be published. She described the night in the same terms she had used in her personal notebook 31 years earlier: precise, unsensational, and unwavering. She did not claim to have witnessed a haunting. She claimed to have witnessed a fact. In her own words, recorded in 2018, I saw what I saw. The monitor knew something it shouldn't have known. I don't have a better explanation than that, and I've stopped needing one. The question that remains is not whether the phenomenon was supernatural. It is a narrower and stranger question. Under what specific physical conditions can a machine access information it was never designed to receive, from a source it was never connected to, about a person who had already died? In the archives of the National Paranormal Research Registry in Salt Lake City, there are 47 documented cases matching the Street Catherine's profile ICU monitors displaying the names and vital signs of deceased patients, all occurring in the postmortem window Grisham described. Only 3 of those cases involve Criticon hardware. The others span 4 different manufacturers and 3 countries. Whatever the mechanism, electromagnetic, biological, or something that requires a word we do not yet have, it appears to operate independent of brand or era. This is the detail that keeps the Street Catherine's case open. Next week on Phantom Atlas, we travel to the Atacama Desert in Chile, where in 2015, a geologist's ground-penetrating radar returned a signal that should not have existed: a heartbeat 400 meters below the surface, in a formation that is classified as Precambrian granite, dated at 1 billion years old. The Chilean Institute of Geological Research has no explanation. Their report runs to 11 pages. The final line reads, in English, "We are still listening."